Grace is ZenlessZoneZero's most misunderstood DPS. She is one of 6 standard banner characters, but can't be easily obtained like Ellen by choice. Today, I'll be breaking down why she's insane, what her kit consists of, her combos, how to build her, and who works well with her. This character is extremely fun to play and has a super high ceiling for damage if you know what you're doing. Before we get into it though, if you like this sort of content or want to see more ZenlessZoneZero, be sure to like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. Let's break it down. Before we get into Grace's kit, there are a few things you should know about Grace that makes her way different than most other damage dealers. Unlike crit-based characters, she focuses primarily on Anomaly. Anomaly is a pretty special and unique mechanic, so let me explain it. Next to the health and days bar of any enemy will be this circular meter that increases whenever you hit an enemy with a specific elemental attack. When this bar reaches max, it applies a special effect depending on what element or attribute you are hitting it with. You can pause right now if you want to read what each of these effects do. But in case that bar filling up is too much to focus on, you'll see a word instead of numbers also describing what anomaly has just been applied. Hitting an enemy with their electric attacks will eventually fill the bar and apply Shock Anomaly for 10 seconds. Shock does a lot of damage over this period of time, but keep in mind that it does take 10 total seconds to do the full amount of damage. Something you also may have heard floating around is this term called Disorder. Disorder is a special damage effect / burst that can be created when applying an anomaly after a different anomaly effect is already present on an enemy. This consumes / removes the old anomaly effect that was already there. With this, you are finishing off the old effect and replacing it with a new one. The benefits of doing this are that you are gaining the new anomaly effect and speeding up the time that it otherwise would have taken to deal the total old anomaly effect damage. So what this means for Grace is that if she applies shock after a boss is already burned, Disorder happens and she applies shock while replacing burn on the boss. This is a major strength of anomaly teams at the moment. You can cut the long 10 seconds that it takes for all this shock damage to happen if you just alternate anomaly effects and speed up the process. As a final note on Disorder, the order of which anomaly you apply first will change how Disorder's damage works. So in case you're curious which is strongest to apply first, Shock, Burn, and Corruption being longer duration anomalies typically make them stronger to apply first so that you can receive all the damage that you would have to wait for in a shorter period of time instead. To be clear, Freeze and Assault definitely fall short in terms of actual damage. However, they make up for the lack of damage with things like increased days inflicted on the target and increasing the crit damage taken by the target for a certain period of time. Grace's kit and playstyle revolve around her core skill, passive, and special attack, but she aims to apply Shock Anomaly as quick as possible since most of her damage comes from Anomaly, not from the skills themselves. Additionally, a lot of her on-field time is spent dealing basic attacks while ramping up the strength of said special attack. This feels bad, but you do have to do this so that you can get max damage on her skills, and if you want to get the powerful Shock Anomaly applied. Moving on to her kit though, her core passive reads that when Grace performs a basic or dash attack, she gains zap stacks with a maximum of 8 being stored. Once at max stacks, you can consume them all by doing an enhanced or unenhanced special attack, and this will increase just how much Shock Anomaly it applies. This is where her need to be on field and dealing basic attacks comes from. Her additional ability also definitely has some of the most confusing wording in her kit, but what you need to take away and know is that saving energy for her EX special attack to then proc more damage after an enemy is shocked is going to be important to make use of this skill. Let's talk about this special attack though. This skill is a grenade that Grace lobs, dealing electric damage and building shock. If you have less than 40 energy, which you can see by the energy bar, she does a singular grenade toss. This is a decent skill with okay damage, decent days, and minor anomaly progress. But if you are at or over 40 energy, she does a much stronger multi-grenade throw that deals more damage, dazes harder, and applies more shock. Let's move on to her basic attacks. Grace's in particular feel smooth and they're also core to her playstyle. There are 4 parts to this combo, and interestingly enough, you can move or reposition while doing it. Something to note for later is that while she's doing these, the basic attack combo will not be interrupted by her doing special attacks, dodges, dash attacks, or dodge counters. The main thing to know about this combo though is that her third attack deals electric damage and builds Shock Anomaly just like her special attack. You can identify this third hit by when she does a horizontal spin before she does a flip in midair. Her ultimate is pretty great with a 1478 damage scaling multiplier that goes all the way up to 3494% after upgrades. This is great for general damage and for clearing out multiple enemy encounters, but it has a massively underrated strength. This is the fact that it applies a lot of progress towards the shock anomaly meter, which is of course your overall goal when playing Grace. The rest of her kit is pretty standard as far as damage dealers go, but keep in mind that her chain attacks, dodge counters, and most of her other skills all apply shock anomaly as well. Before we get into skill priority, we've already seen how impactful Anomaly is by itself. So in regard to skill upgrades specifically for Grace, you won't actually find as much value when it comes to upgrading them. This is both a blessing and a curse, since it will feel like she requires less investment to perform well, though it does also mean that investing in her later will feel even worse. However, if you were to prioritize her skills and want to upgrade, her core skill followed by her EX skill, her chain attack to upgrade both the chain and her ultimate, ending with upgrades to your basic attack, and then your choice of dodge or assist as the final two options is going to be ideal. As a reminder, this is also what was reflected and seen through her damage share chart. So now we know what she does and how her damage is split, but now the question is, what are Grace's combos? Well, she honestly doesn't have many, pretty much just one. Earlier we talked about Grace's basic attack combo not being interrupted, and this is where it matters. Since Grace wants to complete her basic attack combo to stack her zap, her first combo will ideally perform the first three parts of her basic attack to get max stacks. Then she will either use an enhanced or unenhanced special attack, and end the combo off by completing the fourth part of her basic attack combo. The alternative and very casual combo is either spamming your basic attacks or a special attack to move enemies around or just to kill low health enemies quickly. This is barely a combo if I'm being honest, but sometimes you don't need the full first combo to complete the story to farm, etc. Despite Grace being a different kind of damage dealer, she still does want to maintain buffs on her skills, and timing things like her ultimate or big burst windows so that she gets increased damage from her support is still very important too. But if you happen to play Grace with a stunner, you should definitely consider waiting to use her ultimate until the enemy is stunned to take advantage of the damage increase. Spoiler alert for a later section, but sometimes you won't have a stunner, so this isn't always the case and you may end up using your ultimate anyways. However, after Grace has applied her shock anomaly, you will want to swap off of her to apply disorder with another character, or to maximize another agent's skills and damage. So with these two combos, it is ideal to use the first when fighting actual enemies or bosses, but if you find yourself needing to eliminate enemies fast or move enemies closer to each other, feel free to spam your basic or special attacks until they're in the right location. Now there are also a few options for Grace when it comes to choosing her set. Thunder Metal is the default electric damage set, and so long as the enemy is shocked, your attack is increased by 28%, and Grace being able to apply and reapply shock constantly makes this a solid choice for a set. However, another solid consideration may be using 4-piece Puffer Electro, since it does increase ultimate damage and also increases her attack by 15% for 12 seconds after casting her ultimate. If you choose to farm Thunder Metal, the electro damage bonus is a no-brainer, and Grace will definitely see huge value from this and the attack increase. However, it may be difficult at times to take advantage of the 4-piece passive if you are trying to proc disorder constantly. For Puffer Electro, the damage increase to her ultimate and attack are both solid, of course, though this is dependent on how often Grace can use her ultimate to gain these effects. To be clear, 4-piece Thunder Metal has outperformed 4-piece Puffer Electro and any other variation of 4-piece set in calculations, but this leads us to our 2-piece options and what we should be looking for. The first and highest performing 2-piece set is Freedom Blues, which gives 30 anomaly proficiency, and its alternatives are Hormone Punk and Puffer Electro. 30 anomaly proficiency is very good, of course, especially when you account for proficiency directly correlating to just how much damage Grace's shock does percent for percent, but Hormone Punk's 10% attack increase is also versatile and performs very closely in calculations to Freedom Blues as well. For our final choice, Puffer Electro is solid, but in truth the 2-piece pen set definitely lacks in comparison to other sets for Grace specifically. That's not all though. There is one thing I want to mention before giving my final recommendation, and it's the process of farming these sets, it's what you're seeing on screen right now. Currently, there are some that argue farming for a more versatile set like Puffer Electro and using a 2-piece like Freedom Blues may save you some time and resources if you are farming for multiple characters. And I agree, if considering farming and stamina as factors for whether you should pick a certain set, there is definitely value in choosing to farm the most versatile sets. However, my recommendations are based off of damage and performance, and that points towards Thunder Metal 4-piece and 2-piece Freedom Blues. To be clear, there is nothing wrong with using farming as a factor if you want to choose one set or another. It's just not what I personally am doing. And on the topic of farming, and as a side note, farming for Thunder Metal also allows you to farm for Shockstar Disco, which is also used on stun characters like Lycone or Ambi, so it's not even really that much of a waste or a big gain. Grace is one of the first characters in ZenlessZoneZero that may actually make better use of a 4-star as opposed to a 5-star. This is huge since signatures or 5-star weapons in games are traditionally best. To be clear, Fusion Compiler does perform very well as Grace's signature W engine itself, but if you haven't selected a battle pass already, consider taking Electro Lip Gloss since it is a terrific choice. Its passive reads that when enemies have an attribute anomaly, the wielder gains 10 to 16% attack, and they deal an additional 15 to 25% damage to the target, depending on what rank your W engine is. But here are the two catches and why you may not actually want to use this W engine. Firstly, to make the most of this W engine, you actually need a character to apply an attribute anomaly before you start receiving the effects of this W engine. So in other words, you would need someone to set up Grace with an anomaly before she gains these effects and reaps the reward of doing a bunch of damage with it. And actually, based on calculations, Electro Lip Gloss does perform better than most of the other W engine effects, but that's also assuming that it's at rank 5, of which we are not able to get right now since we are on the first battle pass. If Electro Lip Gloss isn't your choice though, Weeping Gemini is also terrific since you can get several copies of it almost immediately. And just take a look, the additional anomaly proficiency tied to this weapon is absolutely insane, but you do need to fully apply a shock anomaly to gain it. As a result, it does shine best when the enemy has a huge health bar that you can constantly stack it against, but it is a great option too. So now that her set and her weapon have context, what does Grace need for her main and substats? The answer is unfortunately somehow even more complicated than anything we've discussed so far. Warning, this next section is going to get a bit nerdy, and for those of you that just want to skip over, a safe main stat combination of anomaly proficiency, electric damage percent, and anomaly mastery will work great specifically for Ellen. However, recently I've begun looking into the value of how much worse or better certain main stats are. And the truth is that the best main stat for each slot depends on a ridiculous number of factors. Over investing in attack percent, for instance, can lead to other stats like anomaly proficiency rising greatly in value. If you have an anomaly proficiency giving W engine, for instance, calculations and team compositions will definitely skew your damage as being higher if you decide to take an attack percent main stat instead, and vice versa. If you have an attack percent main W engine, anomaly proficiency is your best bet. If you play Grace in a triple electro team like Anton, Grace, Rena, and you aren't playing for Disorder, anomaly mastery also just loses more value since you would be maintaining shock at all times anyway. Now, as I mentioned, there are a huge number of variables including buffs and whether you have Rena or not that makes identifying her best main stats impossible, on Grace of course. But like I mentioned earlier, anomaly mastery, electric damage, and anomaly proficiency is definitely going to be fine in most cases. The damage difference is not that insane. When we take a look at substats, things are definitely also way more straightforward since you're definitely just looking for as much attack and anomaly proficiency as possible. But sneaking in pen ratio is also fine if you manage to find it. For substats, the goal really is to just avoid crit or defensive stats, and for a final stat line, ideally 2000 plus attack, 180 plus anomaly mastery, and 300 plus anomaly proficiency is a decent start. These numbers will increase over time though as we gain more stats and have more time to farm. And now let's talk Mindscapes. Grace has a few breakpoints that I'd like to talk about, and these are her M2 and her M6. Mindscape 2 is crazy for both damage and applying shock faster, and since this is applicable over and over through basic attacks, special attacks, or EX special attacks, this uptime will be high. And simply just the anomaly buildup resistance being reduced is already huge, and honestly, given how reliant Grace is on applying shock quickly, this is a major Mindscape to look out for if you do manage to get it. But in fairness, saying that the M6 of a character is obvious since it is the most expensive thing to get. Grace's M6 is absolutely ridiculous given the additional grenade and damage increase when using all zap stacks, but that's the M6, it was always designed to be crazy. Side note, if you're curious about the performance of her M1 and M4, these are also quite good, however they are harder to judge in performance since they are energy based and calculating the actual impact of energy is hard when you are dodging, perfect assisting, and are changing combos / rotations constantly. And now finally, let's talk team compositions. Grace has two main powerful teams to choose from, though they do feel a bit premium to run. The first is with Anton and Rina, and this treats Grace as a secondary DPS who wants to get off shock quickly and then swap to utilize Anton's passive to take advantage of the shock anomaly. Anton's additional ability triggers a burst of shock damage at 45% of its original power after hitting a shocked enemy every 4 critical attacks, and thus Grace has great potential when you pair her with him. The goal of the team is to buff Anton heavily and feature 2 pseudo buffers / supports to increase his total damage output. Now of course, having Anton at M6 in a team composition like this can definitely provide an insane amount of damage. The next and my personal favorite team is Grace, Piper, Rina. Unfortunately, Rina is going to be a constant feature in these teams since she honestly pairs up so insanely well with Grace herself. Now ultimately, Rina does also provide pen and increases shock duration, which makes her not only good for Anton, but very good for everyone in general. It also increases the total DPS of the disorder proc since it increases the length of the shock anomaly. I won't leave you with only these two teams though. Here are a number of additional options you can try out and why they are strong. Grace, Piper, Lucy for the insane damage explosion, but this time featuring Boris and attack increase. Grace, Kaleda, Rina as a premium stun team that allows anomalies to do even more damage while hitting stunned enemies. Anbi, Anton, Grace for the I don't own Rina experience while still shocking and stunning enemies is fine. And finally, Grace, Kaleda, Lucy if you really just love playing Grace as the primary damage dealer and only want to buff her damage after stunning with Kaleda is fine. It's just going to be a little bit inefficient. That's going to be it for this video though, guys. Thank you again for watching. I hope you learned something. If you did, make sure to like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. Thank you again for watching. Thank you again for all the support that you guys have given me for ZenlessZoneZero. I will see you all next time. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night. Whoa, you made it to another Kana video. What's up, what's up, what's up? If you want to watch another similar video, feel free to click on the link above or click on screen, whatever you want. Okay, I'll see you later, guys. Goodbye, goodbye.